This is Kent Hance, best storyteller in Texas, and I've got one of the greatest of all time as a public official, storyteller, and just a great guy, former Governor Rick Perry. And Governor, it's good to see you. You're looking great. You're casual today.
I did. We won't go into why I'm casual, but I am casual today. I appreciate you letting me come on and be on the show. And I concur. You are the greatest storyteller I ever met in my 72 years of life here on planet Texas, and particularly in my 35, coming on 40 years of public service now. Right. Greatest storyteller ever.
Well, I appreciate that. Today we're going to interview you about, we're not going into tax or any political thing. I want people to know who you are, and a lot of us know you, but there's the general public, they don't know a lot about you. You grew up in the big country, north of Abilene,
yep.
And you went to high school in schools at Paint Creek.
Yeah, and that's over in the southeast corner of Haskell County, which is about 60 miles north of Abilene, 200 miles west of Fort Worth. My daddy always referred to it as the Big Empty.
The Big Empty.
The Big Empty. Country. Yeah, the Big Empty is what Dad always called it. You think about it. The year I was born, 1950, there was about 14,000 people lived in Haskell County. That's a classic county out there, 30 miles by 30 miles square, 900 square miles. And now I think they're down to about probably 4,000 in the entire county. If you look from 1950 through 2020, they lost population every 10 years. I mean, there was never a time that they had a population increase, so people moving away. They were far enough away from the major population areas, which was Abilene was the closest thing that had any population to it. Lubbock was 110 miles back to the west, and Fort Worth 200 miles back to the Wichita Falls 100 miles north. So anyway, there just wasn't a lot of reason to lure kids back. Now I came back after I left Texas A&M and went off and flew in the Air Force. I came back and moved back, literally moved back in with my mom and dad when I was 27 years old. That was quite a little treat. My dad, God bless him, he is a good man to put up with me.
He's a great man. He's a good friend of mine, county commissioner, 28
years? 28 years county commissioner, and he was the Kent Hance for whatever you were running for chairman in Haskell County.
Yeah, no, he was the guy. I met him the first time I was needing to go from Haskell to Wichita Falls, and your mom and dad drove me.
Yeah,
I'd said something to you, and you got him.
Yeah, Mother still loves her some Kent Hance. She's still out there living in the same house. 90, she's approaching 92 years old, and just she's something. I'm telling you. I
had her in my leadership class last week. And she did a magnificent job.
Well, she called me and she told me that she sure did enjoy that. So thank you for.
It was a lot of fun. The students loved her.
I'm telling you, she's a piece of work. She's got a great memory. Had some real experiences in life, whether it was being married to a boy just back from the World War II, and growing up out there in Paint Creek, Texas, and married to a county commissioner, and her son goes on to be a state representative, and watch me kind of end up as the Secretary of Energy. She's had quite a seat at history.
She has.
To watch and see what was going on.
And it's also one of the great quilters in America.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that about my mom. My mother was a great seamstress. As a matter of fact, little known fact here, Brother Hance, but she made my underwear. So when I went off to school at Texas A&M, which wasn't, maybe the most urbane place that you'd ever been before, but even the boys at Texas A&M was kind of like, those are pretty interesting looking drawers you got on there. I said, well, my mama makes them for me.
She took good care of you. That's good.
Oh, Lord.
Paint Creek, they played six-man football.
Oh, yeah, we were, as a matter of fact, I think the 1956 cover of Life magazine had the Paint Creek Pirates on the front of it. Now, that's quite a deal. They had a formation called the Paint Creek Spread, which six-man football is 80 yards by 40 yards, a little smaller than a regular 11-man team. But anyway, the Paint Creek spread is that you had the center, and then you had the two ends that were out just right on the sidelines. You had the quarterback back behind the center, and then the two halfbacks, and they were spread out all over the field. And the big play was fast guy go deep.
And he threw it just as hard as you could and high as you could, and he'd run under it.
So, Kemp, we played O'Brien in 1966, I believe, and we beat them 101-42.
And that's before they put the rule in.
No, they actually had that 45-point rule in, and in the third quarter, when we got 45 points ahead, they went over and talked to Blue Holt, who happened to be my cousin, who was the coach of the O'Brien team, and they said, would you like to call this off? He said, nope. He said, we prepared all week for this, and we're going to take it to its fruition.
That's good. 101. Is that a record?
Oh no, I'm sure there've been some others.
I saw Nazareth
was for Paint Creek at that particular time though.
I saw Nazareth beat Spade one time, 78-72.
It is Sandlot at its best. I mean, six-man football. If you've never been to a six-man football team, you ought to find one around you. Go see it. It is a cultural event as well as a sporting event. I mean, it's just I think those, and we played on Thursday because you couldn't get a referee because they were doing the 11-man games. So we played on Thursday night. Matter of fact, first date I ever had in my life was to a six-man football game in 1966. I talked that little old blue-eyed, blonde-headed girl who lived up in town in Haskell, the doctor's daughter, to go with me to that football game.
She must have had a good time. She's still with you.
Yeah, there you are. We dated for 16 years. She was a hard sell, I guess, is best I can tell. And but anyway, that was our first date. Went to Moran, Texas. We played the Moran football team, Paint Creek. I'm pretty sure we outscored them. But six-man football, that's a very iconic rural Texas event.
One of the towns, Sports Illustrated did a story on six-man football, and there was one town in the band. They had a band, and there was one in it. And sometimes he'd play drums, sometimes he'd play a trumpet or whatever, and he has a halftime show, and that was it.
I remember we didn't have a band, but we had a big drum, and Janine Esbel played the drum, and she was one of the cheerleaders. It's kind of like, here's Paint Creek. My high school football coach was also my basketball coach and my track coach, and we didn't have enough kids to play baseball. But he was also the civics teacher, the principal, and he drove the bus. So I mean,
man of many talents.
The man could do it all. He was a Marine, and we were playing O'Brien again in a basketball game, and he didn't think we were putting out in the first quarter, and he said, if you boys ain't up by 10 at the halftime, he said, I'm going to paddle every one of you. It's back when
he's
you
going
could
to
do stuff. Yeah. And we were up by 8 at the halftime, and he took us in there and took a slat out of remember those old wooden chairs that had an oak slat in the back? He wrangled one of those wooden slats out and gave everybody a big old lick. That'd probably cause a lawsuit today, but we went out there and we got out there and hunkered down and won by more than 10. So
yeah, that's a great story. What you went to A&M, and your scoutmaster was the guy that kind of guided you to A&M.
Gene Overton was the class of '32, that's Earl Rudder's class. They were all at A&M together, and this guy went off to the war and was he was an officer in the armored side of Patton's Army in World War II, came back, very successful farmer. He was my superintendent of the Sunday school class. He was on the school board, and he was my scoutmaster. So I spent, outside of my dad, I spent more time with Gene Overton than anybody else in my community. He was just and he proselyted us boys, you going to school at Texas A&M. And he took us all down there. I was 8 years old the first time I ever stepped foot on the campus, and I, got the pixie dust pretty much sprinkled on me, and I was going to Texas A&M. I knew 3 things in life that I wanted to do, Ken. When I was 16, I knew where I wanted to go to college, I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I knew who I wanted to marry.
The earlier you know what you want to do, the easier it is to accomplish.
Yeah, but 2 out of 3 I got done. I went to school where I wanted to go to school, and I married the girl that when I was 16 I knew I wanted to marry. Organic chemistry changed my life. I went to college to be a veterinarian, and me and organic chemistry didn't gee-haw very well. And after my second year, the end of my sophomore year, they called us over there and kind of let us know that, matter of fact, old A. Price was the dean of the vet school, and he'd call these kids in. The school was pretty small in those days. He'd call us in. He was looking, we were lined up outside of his desk, and we went in there, and they called my name. I went in, sat down in front of him, and I'm pretty sure he knew that he'd changed people, of course, and he had a piece of paper there that had my grades on it, and he looks at that, and he looks up at me, and he goes, "James," my full name is James Richard Perry. He goes, "James, you don't want to be a veterinarian, do you?" And I went into my spiel, told him, I said, "Oh, yes, sir, that's all I ever want to do, work with a veterinarian every summer. And, and I know Dr. Gunn and Dr. Romaine and all these guys that are here that went to school with Dr. Price." And he says, "James, I'm looking at your transcript, son. You don't want to be a veterinarian." He said, "You be over at the animal science department tomorrow at 10 o'clock and see Dr. Potts. He's going to take care of you next."
Just that's in and out.
It's in and out.
He wanted you to get that out.
So 2 out of 3 ain't bad. I think they made a song about that sometime ago.
I think you. Thank goodness you
it all worked out.
Accomplished the other. And when you at A&M, you were in the Corps, and you were a yell leader.
Yeah.
And for you non-Aggies or don't know much about it, that's a big deal.
Well, I've always been interested in public service. My dad taught me that volunteering, whether it's for school board or whether it's the military, whether it's in elected office. That my dad was county commissioner and school board member, an old tail gunner on B-17s during the war. My dad taught me at an early age that that's a very honorable thing to do. It's an appropriate thing to do. It's expected of you, if you will. So, running for office and doing those kind of things was a normal. John Sharp and I ran for office the end of our freshman year for sophomore class offices, and we won. Then following the end of our sophomore year, I ran for yell leader, which is a campus-wide office, and lead all the yells at the at the games. John ran for the student senate and was elected, and then he was student body president our senior year, and I was a yell leader again. So he and I, golly, 54 years of being involved in public service in some form or fashion. Sometimes we were on the same team, sometimes we weren't. We ran against each other, of course, in 1998 for lieutenant governor, very close and race, and I was fortunate to win. And John, that was the end of his elected office, because you served with him on the railroad commission, and he was comptroller, and he ran for lieutenant governor. And then in 2006, I asked him to come in and help us do a tax deal, which he was very successful in helping bring the Democrats along. And then I think the end of that decade, A&M had an opening at the chancellor's office, and I called him. I said, "Hey, would you consider doing that?" I said, I think you'd be awfully good at it. And he did, and he still serves. He
talked to me about that after you'd called him, and I urged him to take it.
Yeah.
And about the first 3 years, he'd call me about once a month, and he'd say, "You didn't tell me about such and such." And I said, "Sharp, if I'd told you, you wouldn't have taken the job."
Hance, you and Sharp are great examples of people that I wanted to get into, particularly the chancellor's jobs. The presidents, academicians are okay to be presidents of universities. They may not be my, ideal first choice, but I didn't ever want an academician to be the chancellor. I wanted somebody who had obviously great intellect and the ability to serve in those roles and understood it, but the the systems are a big business. So having somebody that's run something, that's been out, that has the ability to raise money, and you having been in your public service life, a congressman, and you had to go out and raise money and do the things you do. Sharp's the same way. It spent the bulk of his life in elected office. To have your talents as a chancellor made abundant good sense. And in hindsight, looking back on it, I was absolutely correct about that. I think Texas Tech, Texas A&M in particular, have both been better served because they had chancellors who were not academicians and had spent their whole life in the academic world and had an expansive life's experiences. I think you and Sharp are two really good examples of successful chancellors in the state of Texas.
You helped us a lot. I know when we established the Health Science Center in El Paso, you were on to it early and did a great job and helped us out. And, we decided to grow Texas Tech from 26,000 students to 40,000 students. And that's been big for them. A&M has grown. I think they're at 72 now.
They're awfully big. Ken, looking back on my public service life, one of the things I'm most proud of was in '99, as I went in as lieutenant governor, I decided to focus on the border region of Texas because I'd been in the State House from 85 to 90, served with members of the legislature who obviously were down in the border region of Texas, whether it was Cameron County all the way up to El Paso County, and recognized that those counties were not as well served as some of the counties in the state away from the border region. And so we created a committee, a border committee. I think Eddie Lucio, who just retired from the Senate after, good Lord, nearly 35 years of House and Senate time, he may have headed it up. But anyway, beside that point, it really helped people understand that the Valley in particular and El Paso had not been very well served. They didn't get the money for education. They didn't get the money for transportation. El Paso, basically in another time zone, gets forgotten from time to time. So I'm really proud that we drew attention to that. And I look now, that's been 20 plus years since we created that, 99 to here, was it 22 years, thereabouts. And I see those areas of the state really growing. You got a high Hispanic population there. Their population is growing. Economically, they're growing. And here's one of the fascinating things. This last election cycle, and I know we didn't come to talk about politics here today, but when you give people the opportunity to succeed, and the best way you can have somebody succeed in the state of Texas is to get them an education. We moved Texas from 2000 to 2010 from 27th in the nation in high school graduation rates to number 2 overall. If you were Hispanic or African American, you were the number 1 in your ethnic group in America in high school graduation. That started really changing a lot of lives all across the state of Texas, but particularly along that border region.
I think what you did in that regard showed a lot of foresight, and a lot of people rallied behind you on it.
And in 2003, we passed the most sweeping tort reform in the nation, and so they started seeing access to really good quality health care there because they were getting sued so often down there. But anyway, the point is that the dynamic of Texas is changing, obviously demographically as we become more of a minority state, but I think they're becoming, I'll use the word conservative, not Democrat, not Republican. I think they understand that if you won't overtax me, don't overregulate me, don't overlitigate me, and give me a good, accountable public school so I got a skilled workforce, I'll vote for you.
Yeah, and I'll move to Texas.
There you go.
You know, and a lot of people have done that nationwide, especially out of California.
Well, think about SpaceX. You know, we recruited SpaceX. They went down to Boca Chica, and I mean, they've completely changed that part of the world economically. And, you know, I'm sure there's some folks down there that kind of like, man, we liked it the way it used to be, kind of quiet, nobody down here. And but when you really think about it, progress is uncomfortable.
We hope you enjoyed part one of Chancellor Hance's discussion with former Texas Governor Rick Perry. Be sure you like and subscribe to this podcast so you'll be notified when new episodes are released.